Buckle up. We have major breaking legal news. As I'm sure you know by now, 2 days ago, early in the morning on Saturday, the United States attacked Venezuela, captured President Nicolas Maduro and the First Lady, transported them on a U.S. warship to face drug trafficking related charges. This all happened just 2 days ago. And at the time, in the early morning hours, Donald Trump announced that we are running the country of Venezuela. This happened 2 days ago. Now, why am I saying this is major breaking legal news? It is because every credible international law expert views these actions as unlawful under the United Nations Charter, period. However, and I think you probably know what I'm about to say. However, law on the books, and what is it now? Maybe $5. It will get you a cup of coffee, or you can get one for free if you come over to my house. Law on the books means nothing when you have someone for whom those laws do not present legal constraints. Now, I said to you, every credible international law expert says this is a violation of the UN Charter. But how will that be enforced? We're going to get to that. Now, of course, I'm sure you're aware of other laws that, in theory, might constrain the president. And you might be thinking of the U.S. Constitution. You might be thinking about other laws in the U.S. But I got news for you. We don't actually have a Congress that is functioning and willing to step up at this moment and stop him. Keep in mind that in October, the U.S. Senate, thanks to the Republicans, voted down a measure to say that Donald Trump could not use force in Venezuela without congressional approval. Congress is not going to step up and stop him. And what about the courts? Well, this is the problem. The courts typically will not interfere with the U.S. president's use of unilateral authority. And I'm going to explain why. Now, I am not an international law expert, and this is not my field. However, I have read several pieces from people who are, one is a law professor at Yale, Jack Goldsmith, and the other, Una Hathaway, a law professor at Yale, and others on the international scene who explain this. And so I will be explaining to you what they have written. This is my parsing of their legal analysis, not my own. Now, let's get to it. First of all, what is going on now with Donald Trump is especially problematic because he does not want to stop at Venezuela. And this should not surprise us because at the beginning of his presidency, he was talking about wanting to take Greenland, wanting to take Venezuela, wanting to take Mexico, wanting the entire Western Hemisphere in his little, short, stubby fingers. Okay? We know that. Okay? Let me take a sip of coffee because I'm gonna keep going here and I need a little fuel. He's been saying this, and I had been calling it the MORON doctrine, right? Instead of the Monroe doctrine. Now he has suddenly come upon the idea that he's heard about or remembered James Monroe, the president who articulated that we should just go out and take the Western Hemisphere and under our control. You might remember that. I wasn't alive, neither are you, but maybe you studied the Monroe doctrine in civics or American history at some point. Now, James Monroe was president. He gave this address in 1823. That's over 100 years ago. And his view was that the Western Hemisphere was ours, right? And basically, he wanted what he called the Americas, to be shut off from the European powers, who would be the colonial powers of the world. So he articulated this about 100 years ago. So someone's told Donald about this, and Donald's now calling it the Donroe Doctrine, which I refuse. I will call it the Moron Doctrine. Now, why does Donald Trump have Venezuela on his mind? Yes, you can see that. It's all about the oil. This is not the first time you have heard Donald Trump saying, I would have taken the oil. And I'm not just talking about Iraq. He was talking about Venezuela, because the United States has been entangled with Venezuela, in particular Nicolas Maduro, for a while. So let me just go through what I said at the beginning to pull out an important thing. So 2 days ago, early morning on Saturday, the U.S. goes in, abducts Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, and his wife, uses military forces to attack people. The civilians died in this attack, and they take them, abduct them, kidnap them, whatever word you want to use, and transport them on a U.S. warship so they can face drug trafficking related charges, which they are facing today in federal court in New York. And yes, after he announced that, Donald Trump said we would be running the country, although nominally the vice president under Maduro will be, and we'll talk about her in a moment, she is in charge. Now, before we get to her, I want to talk about the indictment, because Donald Trump really isn't anymore. So this is what's called a superseding indictment. There was already an indictment in place for Maduro and many others. And this new superseding indictment, signed by a new grand jury, included the old charges, but added Maduro's wife and his son, I believe, and may have dropped some other people off of this. And what the argument is, essentially, in this indictment is that Maduro and his wife, etc., were participating with Venezuelan drug gangs in trafficking drugs to the United States, right? And let's be clear, even if these charges are backed by evidence, there are real problems with going into a country and abducting their leader for criminal, to show up for criminal charges. Now, you might be saying to me, wait a second, Jennifer, no. We've done it before. Yes, I know, but the circumstances are different. And we're going to get to, for example, the fact that this was timed, and you might think it was timed just to avoid discussion of Jeff Epstein. Sure. But it also happened to be, Saturday morning happened to be this 36th anniversary of when President Bush in 1989 orchestrated a U.S. invasion of Panama to take Manuel Noriega for drug trafficking charges. And of course, he was convicted and he served time. I think he got something like a 40-year sentence, but was let out in 17 years on good behavior. Now, the invasion, that one began in December, but culminated, they grabbed him on January, I guess, what are we on today? Today's the 5th, so the 3rd of 1989. Now, we'll get to that precedent, and I will tell you why this is a different, according to international law experts. And even if there is a precedent, doesn't make something lawful. Okay. So this is the pretext. The pretext Donald Trump has. So there's a sort of moral pretext where they went in, and then the reality that Donald Trump is talking about now. So the sort of called moral pretext is what they have been doing for months when they had been killing now more than 112 people, these fishermen or maybe low-level drug traffickers on boats, right? You know, this is happening both in the Caribbean and in the Pacific, the Eastern Pacific, right? But we know, we've seen, these boat strikes. We've been talking about those here for a while. And the pretext for those boat strikes are that Donald Trump had, in January this year of his term, designated certain Venezuelan gangs as like Tren de Aragua, TDA, as narco terrorists. So he starts with that. And then they decide that because they're narco terrorists, that this is some kind of act of aggression against the US, which entitles them to kill them. We've talked about why that doesn't seem correct, but even if you accept some of that framework, it's still unlawful under international law. But I don't accept that framework, and this makes it, of course, murder. So we've been talking about the excuse of murdering people on the high seas or in the Caribbean, essentially, who were, in one case, not even headed to the US, right? Who allegedly have, they say narcotics, but so far it's been just cocaine, maybe, and marijuana. But they are saying that they are killing them because drug trade is terrorism. Okay. We don't have to buy that. And we certainly shouldn't buy it in this situation, because when Donald Trump is asked about what we are doing right now in Venezuela, it is all about the oil. So let's talk about that first before I dive deeper into Una Hathaway and Jack Goldsmith and others on the analysis. Because bottom line, and I will quote law professor Jimmy Garul from Notre Dame, who's a former U.S. attorney. This is quoting him, this is clearly a blatant, illegal, and criminal act, period. But before we get to that, let's talk about what Donald Trump is saying now. Let's start first with the fact that, unlike in the case with Manuel Noriega, where President Bush, George H.W. Bush the daddy, that he did brief Congress about the plans to abduct, to take into custody through invasion of Panama, Manuel Noriega. Although they didn't vote on it, he briefed them. In this case, and also there had been in the case of Panama, there had been some U.S. lives taken in the area. I'm not justifying that. I'm just making some distinctions here. In this case, Donald Trump did not brief Congress. He told Republicans, some Senate Republicans in the leadership, and some Senate members of the House, but not Democrats. Didn't even brief them about this. Okay? And secondly, to give you more facts on this before we get into any law here. Secondly, you'll never guess who he did brief. Never guess. Remember how I told you this was all about the oil? Okay, let's play this.
And before the operation took place,
yes.
Did you maybe tip them off?
Before and after.
He was asked, you can't quite hear this, did you tell the oil companies about the attack on Venezuela? He was asked this last night on Air Force One. Oops, let me put it again.
And before the operation took place,
yes.
Did you maybe tip them off?
Before and after. And they want to go in, and they're going to do a great job for the people of Venezuela. And they're going to represent us well.
So there's some mixed messaging there. Congress, don't tell the Democrats in Congress, but tell the oil companies. this sure looks like oligarchy and kleptocracy. Tell them they're going to do a good job for America. Now, here's the deal. Yes, we've heard some of the oil companies, we've heard some reporting that they're kind of staying silent. And maybe I've even done some reading saying that it will take years to get the oil industry in Venezuela up and running, that it's more complicated than just go in there and tell them to write us a check. So that's going to factor into how long we are staying in there. Okay, that's one thing. The other thing is when you tell a lot of people about a geopolitical event that is going to affect the prices of all kinds of commodities and security investments, there's going to be trading in advance. And yes, that kind of thing happens. Now, one more thing. Donald Trump has been talking about, one of the justifications you're hearing on the news, not a legal justification, but a moral one you're going to hear again and again, is that Manuel Noriega was a dictator, that he had people killed and jailed when they opposed him. The other thing you may know is that he's not considered a legitimate ruler because he lied about the outcome of recent elections and stayed in office despite having lost. Do you ever hear of someone who lied about the outcome of an election and tried to stay in office? Surely that can't be what's upsetting Donald Trump. Also, have you ever heard about a Latin American president who was engaged and convicted of drug trafficking, who was just pardoned by Donald Trump? Remember, the president of Honduras? So that idea cannot be actually motivating him. The drug excuse and the trying to use it as a legal excuse, drug trafficking excuse, as well as the moral excuse, oh, he was a terrible person, as well as the additional legal excuse, which we'll talk about. If he wasn't the real leader, if he was not a legitimate leader, Donald Trump's lawyers are going to argue, then he's not protected by the UN. We can go and abduct him for criminal purposes. That's their legal argument. And he's also not protected in our courts by any kind of sovereign immunity. That's the arguments, right? So this is all tangled together. And every time you parrot these arguments, well, he was a terrible person and was he really legitimate? You are playing into the act of lawless aggression in which Donald Trump has engaged and is akin to what Putin's doing in Ukraine and akin to Hitler invading Poland. So don't fucking do it. You don't need to say he was a bad guy, but what we're doing is illegal. You don't need to say that. Lots of bad guys out there. You don't begin that way. Don't fall for it. Okay? Now, it's not about the drugs. Clearly, when he's willing to pardon and set free from prison the president of Honduras. It's not about the lying about, overstaying and lying about losing an election. Donald Trump loves those kind of people. He sucks up to those kinds of people. It's about the oil. It's about grabbing and taking things violently without the consent of others. Donald Trump is the person who, as a child, threw rocks at babies. Donald Trump is an adjudicated rapist. It's true. It's true. Judge Kaplan said sexual abuse using his fingers is the equivalent of what we would understand as rape. Okay. The only reason, sorry, it's early in the morning. The only reason the jury did not find him liable for rape but chose sexual abuse is because E. Jean Carroll honestly testified that she was not sure whether he had put his penis inside of her or it was just one of his fingers, not something that he might have wanted to brag about, but no one gets this explicit usually. And I am, because I am pissed off. Okay. So Donald Trump is someone who threw rocks at babies, is credibly accused and adjudicated sexual assaulter and rapist. This is who the guy is. His best friend was the most notorious child sex trafficker. Is there any doubt that there will be no stopping him unless the people who actually have the power to stop him act? And they are the Republicans in the House and the Democrats, and the Republicans in the Senate and the Democrats. But you need the Senate votes. You need a majority in the House, right? To get this going, to get these impeachment articles going. We need to impeach and convict Donald Trump and remove him from office, period. This is a fact. If we don't do this, he will continue, right? We need to, again, make this happen. This is the only way to stop this man. Now, if you're wondering, again, what it's about, let's listen. When he is asked about the human rights and democratic abuses, he doesn't even bother to tell the press on Air Force One that, yes, that's a priority. Listen to what he said.
Go ahead.
Now, are you going to demand that Delcy Rodriguez let opposition figures return or free any political prisoners?
We haven't gotten to that yet. Right now, what we want to do is fix up the oil, fix up the country, bring the country back, and then have elections.
Now, is it fair?
We better bring the country back. Otherwise, you're going to have a mess that's so bad. It was really bad. It's going to get a lot worse unless we go in and fix it.
Is the U.S. going to real?
Did you actually hear that? Listen to the beginning again.
Go ahead.
Now, are you going to demand that Delcy Rodriguez let opposition figures return or free any political prisoners?
Are you going to insist the Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, let dissidents return or free political prisoners? He says no, because he wants to get the oil fixed first and then have elections. How are you going to have valid elections if the opposition leaders can't come back? How are you going to have valid elections if people are afraid of being imprisoned for supporting anyone other than Delcy Rodriguez? The fact that they are willing to keep her in place when she is hand in glove, if they actually believe Maduro is a bad guy and hurt people, why in the world would they keep her in place? Well, part of it is we're getting this mixed story. We're being told, again, we'll get to the legal stuff. I'm just trying to tell you why this is so hard to talk about, because we're getting factually different stories. And I think I know why. It has to do with legal stuff. What's going on here is they're trying to claim that they have Delcy Rodriguez like a puppet on a string. Whenever she sees a microphone, she's like, F you, United States. Maduro's the only legitimate leader. Send him back. And they're like, nah, she's good with us. That's what she's just saying out loud. But then they threaten her and say, if she doesn't cooperate, if she isn't compliant, it will be worse for her. Worse for her. What's worse than being abducted in the middle of the night, put on a warship, and taken to another country to stand trial? I'm not sure, but it sounds like a threat, physical threat for harm or death. That's how I read it. But let's listen to it. Let's listen to what he had to say about Delcy Rodriguez.
It depends on what happens. It depends a little bit on the new administration, if you want to call it.
So if you see that pushback from Rodriguez and ultimately...
Well, I don't think there was pushback. I think that...
She called it...
You hear a different person than I hear.
Really? So you have spoken with her?
We talked to them, yeah.
Oh, you did speak with her?
They've been very good.
Because she called it kidnapping of Maduro.
It's all right. It's not a bad term. Go ahead.
No, are you going to demand that?
Oh, kidnapping. It's not a bad term. Now, the reading I'm doing provides mixed messages. I see what she says out loud, and then there's some reporting claiming, oh, yeah, that's what she's saying, but she's really cooperating with Trump. It's hard to know who to believe in this situation, okay? But there's more, of course. What is most problematic here isn't merely going into another country, abducting a foreign leader, and holding them to account for actions they took while they were president. That in of itself is messed up for several reasons, not just the UN, which we'll get to, but also take a moment to remember the United States Supreme Court in Trump versus the United States, where we had that ruling from the Roberts Court indicating that a former president, well, first of all, we already have this Office of Legal Counsel opinion saying you can't bring criminal charges at the federal level against a sitting president. We got that. So you can't even do that in the US. So we can't hold our own president to account in our own courts for criminal action. But we can go abduct. Don't you love this? We can go abduct the president of another sovereign nation and hold him, try him here. Okay, so that's messed up. The second thing that's equally messed up here is that in the US, we cannot even try a former US president for actions they took while in office. I mean, at all, if it's within their sort of core responsibility, like their article, what they call Article 2 powers. And even if it's not explicitly at the heart of what they do, such as what the court said, things like the pardon power or other specific actions, maybe military actions, even things that are just within their the scope of employment and their scope of authority, that like their official action, there's a presumption that cannot make them stand trial. So we have a situation where our own leaders can be criminal monsters and there ain't nothing we can do about it. And they can take that monstrous behavior and just go out lawlessly and grab other leaders. Doesn't seem right to me. It seems like it is what the kind of sort of call a moral hazard or an invitation for lawless, unaccountable actions. So there's more. So in case you were wondering what concerns me, besides that paradox, thank you, John Roberts, we also have the fact that Donald Trump is eager to, as I said, expand, to take other parts of the Northern Hemisphere, right? We know this to be the case. This is something that he has talked about since almost the beginning of this presidency. And people kind of laughed him off a little bit, like he's not gonna do that. I would like to say that everything Donald Trump says that here we go, that he wants to do that would be harmful, he always does, guys. He always does. And any promise he makes to be helpful, he only does it if it helps the super wealthy and well-connected who can pay up in some way, it seems, for that privilege. The man lines his own pocket, builds his own ego, and smashes things that get in his way or anything he perceives as more beautiful, more powerful, more honorable than him, which would explain why Machado is not now being put in place to lead Venezuela. You might remember that a woman by the name of Maria Corina Machado won the Nobel Peace Prize. And she thanked Donald Trump when she won it. But the deal is, my friends, that she, when she won that prize, the problem is she did not refuse it. And as a result, when push comes to shove, quite literally, when push comes to the abduction of the president of Venezuela and the possibility that this dissident leader would now have an opportunity to lead the country, no dice. No dice. Why? It's been reported that the baby that Donald Trump is doesn't want her because he's jealous. I think it's deeper than that. He wants a puppet. The last person in the world he wants is someone who cares about human rights. He wants someone who's going to hand over the oil production to U.S. companies. Now, I need to back up and say, you may have heard that, Venezuela many years ago nationalized the oil industry, right? And you may have heard that even more recently, there was a shakedown where the oil companies were supposed to give a bit of the profits to Venezuela in order to operate there, because there are U.S. oil companies operating in Venezuela. But if shaking down companies to give the government a piece of it, which may sound like socialism to you, but is exactly what Donald Trump is doing, sounds like a problem. It's not a problem for Donald Trump. It's just that he wants to be the one shaking people down. Now, let's go and talk about Machado, because she would be the leader. If we're going to engage in this game and we're going to say we're doing it for the right reasons, she would be the person. But let's listen to why Donald Trump rejected her. And I got it right here. Sorry, guys.
And some neighboring countries in Latin America have condemned the operation and appealed to the United Nations. In Colombia, protesters gathered outside the U.S. Embassy. Let's bring in ABC's Matt Rivers, who is in Bogota, Colombia, with more. Matt, thanks for joining us. I know you've covered this part of the world for many years. What can you tell us about the reaction inside Venezuela now?
Well, there's no question these are tense days. You've got an entire country wondering what exactly is going to happen next. We know that Maduro has been taken out, but a lot of members of his inner circle are still in charge. It does appear that the regime is still in charge inside that country. So we're a long way away from figuring out what the end game here is. Even listening to Donald Trump talking about how the United States of America is going to, quote, run Venezuela. Well, what does that mean? There's a huge lack of detail right now. Venezuelans are trying to look at the situation, and they don't have all of the facts with which to come to a final determination. I think for so many Venezuelans also, this is an incredibly complex issue, right? On the one hand, for many, many Venezuelans, the Maduro regime represented something awful for their country, a regime that stole from their country, that took money away from hardworking families, that was corrupt, that enriched the people around Maduro at the expense of ordinary people in that country. So there's a lot of people who are thrilled to see him go. And at the same time, there are very real fears about interventionism. There are very real memories about the painful period of colonialism that this part of the world went through. They don't want to see the United States simply come in and run things here. But people remember the Maduro regime and what it stood for so many families. Remember, this is a police state. People were being taken off the streets. You couldn't protest openly. We're political prisoners, black jails. These are families that were torn apart by this regime. So when we're talking about this issue as a political one, I think we're also kind of missing the forest for the trees when it comes to ordinary Venezuelans. You can think two things at the same time, right? On the one hand, Maduro regime for many was a really bad thing, and they are very happy to see him go. On the other hand, there are concerns about the future and what it means for their sovereignty.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, if we take a wider view here, what are leaders and people around the world, what are they saying and how are they responding?
Well, it kind of depends on who you ask. I mean, where I am in Colombia, you've got the president of Mexico, the leadership of Cuba, typically more leftist-leaning governments right now. They're, of course, condemning what has happened here. You've seen protests pop up around the world in major European cities against some of this U.S. action. So there's no question there are people who are saying the United States flouted the rule of law here and that this should have never happened, like Maduro or not. But on the other hand, you have so many people around the world. And I'm thinking specifically of the Venezuelan diaspora. You've got 8 million roughly refugees who have fled the country next to the one I'm in right now over the last few years, who are cheering this, who have taken to the streets and are thrilled about the action that the United States has taken here. So mixed reaction around the world to what has been, without question, one of the most stunning events that we have seen the United States undertake in a foreign policy way in the last 25 years.
Yeah, and their feelings will definitely depend on what comes in the days ahead as well. Matt Rivers for us. Thank you.
Okay. So what I wanted to be able to share with you, which you didn't have it, is when Donald Trump just said Machado was a nice lady, but she couldn't lead the country. Now, again, before I get to the quick legal analysis, let me share with you. I love Aaron Rupert, who does a lot of clipping for all of us on Blue Sky and those of you who are still, unfortunately, on Twitter. And here's what Aaron had to say. So on Air Force One, Trump, in a single gaggle on Air Force One, just threatened a second strike against Venezuela. He threatened Cuba, Mexico, Colombia, Iran, and Greenland. And by the way, attacking Greenland would be an attack on EU and Denmark, in other words, our NATO allies. Donald Trump said that last night. He has no plans to stop. And let's see what Steve Miller's wife, Katie Miller, put up on her social media account. I think that you can probably see this. It is the United States flag imposed on North America, right? I'm sorry, imposed. This one is on Greenland. And she said, soon, soon. And you can see this. You can see where this is. If you look in the bottom right corner, you can see this is at the top of the globe. You can see where Greenland is. That's how this map has done this. And this is his plan to, of course, take over his moron doctrine, to take over the entire the entire Western hemisphere from top to bottom. So she put that up, and that, of course, truly disturbed Denmark. Denmark is still a kingdom, like a constitutional monarchy, and it has a prime minister. And it, of course, hold on one second. I think I've got, no, I don't have another slide on this one. And of course, it has former ambassadors and others who are speaking out about how troublesome this is. Denmark is not interested in giving up Greenland. Doesn't matter that Donald Trump says he wants Greenland in their view. Now, here's the deal. Yes, he is announcing this sort of rape and pillage across the world kind of deal, or across the Western Hemisphere. But let's keep in mind what's actually happening at this moment in Venezuela. This is a post from the New York Times, which links to an article, but I'm giving you the skinny on it. And it says that a day after, so that was yesterday, so on Sunday, the day after President Trump declared the U.S. plan to run Venezuela for an unspecified period, the Defense Department officials said there were no U.S. military personnel in the country, but a force of 15,000 troops are on land nearby, and a dozen warships remain at a high state of readiness. Well, gotta tell you, that doesn't give me a ton of comfort that they're stationed nearby, like Puerto Rico. Where are they? Nearby. Okay, so I'm laying this out. So one more thing about Greenland. This was at the initial press conference on Saturday. Let's play this.
Do you expect to take an action against Greenland?
I don't want to talk about Greenland.
Oh, I'm sorry. This was not at the original press conference. The photo is from the original press conference when they were at that little tented area in Mar-a-Lago. And let me just say something. Donald Trump is such a lazy fuck that he couldn't get out of his vacation home to do a day's work. So his team, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, and the other sick as AF sycophants, were down at Mar-a-Lago. They were not in a skiff because they were in a sort of area with black curtains around it where you could see daylight above it. And they were in essentially a little tented area at his private club. And while they were like on camera, they were searching social media like Twitter to see the reactions to what they had done. What you're seeing now is an image from that, but the voice that you're hearing is from when he was on Air Force One, and folks are asking him, like, what's next? Shit. Unbelievable. Here we go.
Do you expect to take an action against Greenland?
I don't want to talk about Greenland. Talk about Venezuela, Russia, Ukraine, and we'll worry about Greenland in about 2 months. Let's talk about Greenland in 20 days.
On Venezuela, we talked so much about energy.
By the way, I will say this about Greenland. We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you.
What would the justification be, sir? What would the justification
to boost up security in Greenland? They added one more dog sled. It's true.
Sir,
they thought that was a great move.
What would the justification be for a claim to Greenland? What would the justification be?
I don't want to talk about Greenland now. I just say this. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And the European Union needs us to have it. And
I mean, is there any response that I can give to you that would, I don't know, satisfy your interest in what the hell is going on? Now, what I want to share with you, though, is, again, and we'll get to the legal analysis is very brief here because it's pretty basic. What I want to share with you now is Marco Rubio going around on the Sunday shows trying to this sort of good cop, Donald's bad cop, because Marco Rubio has enough of a brain to understand Trump is sending a message of what he wants. He wants oil. He wants domination. That's what he wants. Rubio, and he claims that we're running things. Rubio wants to, because he's clearly been briefed by the lawyers, speak that in such a way that will align with the official story that they're going to need to use in court, the official story that obviously the lawyers have written up. Okay. And so that is what he's doing. And the good news is the press doesn't seem to be buying it. So let's listen to him on with Kristen Welker right now. I think you will like this. Here we go.
Mr. Secretary, who is in charge? Are you running Venezuela right now?
Yeah, I mean, I keep people, fixating on that. Here's the bottom line on it is we expect to see changes in Venezuela. Changes of all kinds, long-term, short-term. We'd love to see all kinds of changes. But the most immediate changes are the ones that are in the national interest of the United States. That's why we're involved here, because of how it applies and has a direct impact on the United States. Okay, we are not going to be able to allow in our hemisphere a country that becomes a crossroads for the activities of all of our adversaries around the world. We just can't allow it. We can't have a country where the people in charge of its military and in charge of its police department are openly cooperating with drug trafficking organizations. We're not going to allow that. These things are direct threats to the United.
Hold on one second. Okay. Why are people fixating on who's running Venezuela? Well, I don't know, Marco. Maybe it's because Donald Trump said we are, and Donald Trump can't run a casino without blowing it up. And he's not running this country, United States, very well. So yeah, we're wondering who's flipping running it, how much money is going there, what the plans for boots on the ground are, why we suddenly have money for this adventure when we can't even support people's premiums for health insurance. Yeah, we're kind of wondering, Marco. And then he goes on, even though he's mostly played the sort of good cop role, everything he's saying here isn't really around the legal in the second half. It's really around the moral justification, saying things like, it's sort of he's sticking with, I should be fair, he is sticking with it's all about narco-terrorism line. Notice that he isn't talking about oil. Donald Trump talks about oil. Marco Rubio talks about drugs. Let's continue.
Secretary.
Okay. So we actually now don't really know who is running Venezuela. Okay, fine. What else did Rubio have to say, right? Yeah, we are fixating, Marco, on who is running Venezuela for good reason, because Donald Trump said he was running Venezuela. And that kind of freaked us out because actually, if he is running Venezuela and he is planning to run Venezuela, then you sure as hell are going to need congressional approval. Yeah. So let me also add. Let me see. Here's I've got one more Rubio interview that I want to add for you, but I don't quite have it. Give me a second. Okay, I'm sorry. I got another. You know how I was telling you that we have Donald Trump threatening every country in the Western Hemisphere, practically, or I should say in the Americas, okay, and up to Greenland. Let's play this. Cuba, let's listen.
One of the things that is happening, and I think you see it all the time, Howard, you've seen it, that Cuba is ready to fall. Yes. Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they're going to hold out. But Cuba now has no income. They got all of their income from Venezuela, from the Venezuelan oil. They're not getting any of it. And Cuba literally is ready to fall. And you have a lot of great Cuban Americans that are going to be very happy about this. One of the things.
It's really astonishing what someone put out absolute war pig he is. Now, how about having troops on the ground? I mentioned that so far troops are at the ready, right? But they are not on the ground. Again, we have another example of where we have audio from Air Force One. And that last audio clip, you also could see still shots of Maduro in U.S. custody, being, as Donald Trump would say, being kidnapped. Now let's listen to what he's saying about ongoing war, boots on the ground in Venezuela.
We were prepared to do a second strike if we needed. We're totally prepared.
But that's off
We're
the table.
still prepared.
That's off the table now.
No, it's not. If they don't behave, we will do a second strike.
Will you demand
The
that the
question is
Venezuelans
that the American troops, are they going to be on the ground? They're doing any kind of peacekeeping? I think Americans are very...
It depends on what happens. It depends a little bit on the new administration, if you want to call it.
So if you see that pushback from Rodriguez and ultimately...
Well, I don't think there was pushback. I think that...
She called it...
Okay. So again, he's pretending like there is absolutely no pushback. Now let's talk about, shall we? Let's talk a little bit about Mexico. One more clip, and then we're going to talk the legal. And we will, I promise you, finish to close to on time. Okay, here we go. And this is about President Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico. Let's go.
Land, but it sounded like
And by the way, you have to do something with Mexico. Mexico has to get their act together because they're pouring through Mexico, and we're going to have to do something. We'd love Mexico to do it. They're capable of doing it. But unfortunately, the cartels are very strong in Mexico.
I remember one time you actually, speaking of Mexico, I asked you about Claudia Sheinbaum, and you told me at one point you had offered to send U.S. troops into Mexico to combat drug trafficking there. Is that something you
I like
spoke to her
Claudia.
about?
I think she's a terrific person. I would say every single time I talk to her, I offered to send troops.
And she's just not willing?
She's concerned. She's a little afraid. The cartels are running Mexico. Whether you like it or not, it's not nice to say, but the cartels are running Mexico.
Okay. And I mean, the way these reporters talk, and she's not willing. Oh, yeah. That'd be like, you're not willing to quarter soldiers in your own home from the U.S. because, of course, they care about your well-being. Okay. So now let's talk about the quick legal analysis because I talked a bit at the beginning. So here's the deal. When it comes to international law, right? We have the UN Charter, and under the UN Charter, it's very clear that what Donald Trump is doing is unlawful, right? There is no question that, according to all credible international law experts, that this is unlawful. And we're specifically talking about, oh, shoot. Sorry, guys. We're specifically talking about Article 2, subsection 4. Okay. I know this is getting a little in the weeds, but let's take a look at Article 2, subsection 4. Okay. And let me just open that up for you with a share screen. Okay. So Article 2, subsection 4. So Article 2 begins with the organization and its members, in pursuit of the purposes stated in Article 1, shall act in accordance with the following principles. So what are the purposes stated in Article 1? To maintain international peace and security, to develop friendly relations among nations, international cooperation, harmonizing the acts of nations. Okay, so let's look at Article 2, Section 4. Okay, all members shall refrain. Here we go. All members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. Okay? Now, there is, again, consistent views that what Donald Trump did in abducting the president of Venezuela was in violation of the UN Charter. Now, the problem is that is a violation of international law, but where are the teeth? That will not act as a true legal constraint, okay? And it is, as Jack Goldsmith said, and I think I can just pull this up for you and put it in the, let me just put this in the chat for those of you who want to see his piece. As he said, look, this clearly violates the charter. This intervention on Saturday clearly violates the charter. And he added, even if there are no domestic legal implications from that violation, and even if, Goldsmith adds, international law here lacks any enforcement mechanism, illegal, okay? Now, Goldsmith, though, goes on to talk about, well, what about under U.S. law? And the deal is, and Goldsmith explains to us, is that it's pretty easy for the Office of Legal Counsel to write up a memo explaining why this, even though this is a violation of the UN Charter, it's not actually a legal violation. And how does Jack Goldsmith know that this can be done? Because he's referring to Bill Barr. Yes, Bill Barr wrote up the Office of Legal Counsel memo when George H.W. Bush was in office. Yeah, interesting how these people pop up repeatedly. And what Bill Barr mentioned in this memo was, though, let me just hold on one second. What Bill Barr mentioned in this, mentions in this, well, let me just say this differently. What Goldsmith talks about is this. Goldsmith says, an important possible limit on President Trump's unilateral power recognized in these Department of Justice Office of Legal Counsel opinions is that congressional authorization might be needed for, quote, prolonged and substantial military engagements, typically involving exposure of U.S. military personnel to significant risk over a substantial period. We don't know how long that is. What is a substantial period? Now, we also have, of course, the Congress, even though I know you're going to point to the Constitution and say Congress gets to declare war. Well, welcome to the world in which we have been living for a very, very long time. Congress has abdicated that responsibility. And there is, however, the War Powers Resolution he refers, Goldsmith and others refer to, and this requires whenever there is a use of force that the president has to notify lawmakers within 48 hours of introducing forces into hostilities. And you have to basically remove the forces in 90 days. Now, 60 to 90 days, there's this extension period. Now, there's another piece, which is if Donald Trump really plans to, quote unquote, run the country, this could be a violation of the Geneva Convention, the law of war. And let me just read this to you. Military occupation is a temporary measure for administrating territory under the control of invading forces and so on. So, you know, there is that problem. Now, here's one last deal. The problem here, of course, is if we are thinking about the Office of Legal Counsel, the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi, of course, they are going to write a memo saying this is no different than what was done back with Noriega. And what we have, though, is others saying, no, this is really quite different. In an interview in The New Yorker, Una Hathaway says, no, this is different. There is no kinetic threat to the United States. No one, even if drugs are coming into the country, this is not a kinetic threat. There is no bombing, there is no shooting, there is no physical violent attack on the United States by a foreign country. And arguably, that was a different situation with Noriega. What Una Hathaway also points out, though, is the United States, again, is going to try to act as if, because he was not actually legitimately president, that means we're not actually violating the charter. Well, let me tell you that the experts over at Chatham House and others, so I have Mark Weller, a professor who is also head of the International Law Program. Let me provide this link for you. And I'm going to share this screen. Sorry, guys, one more sharing, and then we will get to Crazy Town. So we have him saying the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife by U.S. forces operating in Venezuela and his forced transfer to the U.S. for trial poses a significant challenge for international law. Bottom line is, again, it's clearly a significant violation of Venezuelan sovereignty and the UN Charter. He says justifications are hard to see. And this is a key point. In international law, only a kinetic assault with military or similar means qualifies as a trigger for self-defense. And this argument about restoring democracy, he brings up in this piece what happened with Noriega and also the invasion of Grenada in 1983. And in that case, what we're trying to say, not according to Trump, because he's all for the oil, but we are alleging that Maduro stole the election in 2024 and that the real victor was Edmundo Gonzalez. Well, if Edmundo Gonzalez is the real victor, why isn't Donald Trump putting him in power? Well, okay. Now, the other problem, though, is this. There are a lot of countries where elections are questionable. And so how does the UN decide who is a sovereign? Well, the standard here, and this is really important, says in classical international practice, those who exercise effective control over a country's population and territory will be treated as the government. Considerations of legal or political legitimacy matter less. Accordingly, most governments have abandoned the practice of formally recognizing newly established governments and so on. So here's the deal. Maduro is the leader, or was until we abducted him, the leader of Venezuela. Now, that's what I've got for you. I will get more into some of the legal details later, but the bottom line, what we get to here is it's not that might makes right. Might can make wrong, but without an enforcement mechanism, Donald Trump will get away with it. Just like someone speeding on the highway, unless you're pulled over, you're still violating the law, but there is no consequence. And there is no one who can actually pull Donald Trump over, take him out of the car, and strip him of his presidential license other than the House and the Senate through the process of impeachment in the House, then conviction in the Senate, which takes the 2/3 majority, and then barring him forever from office with a second vote, and that's just majority over that. This is the only thing that we can demand be done because nothing else will help. And the lukewarm response that we are getting from people like Chuck Schumer, I don't even want to start with you. But now, we really flippin' deserve some crazy town. And I've got a doozy for you. It's crazy in the, oh my God, that is so crazy type of crazy. So let's do it. And I really hope Emily is watching because she may have remembered me mentioning a piece of this, but only one piece. And now I found out. Okay, guys. So Denmark might be in the hot seat because Donald Trump wants Greenland. And so here's the deal. I'm scrolling through Blue Sky the other day and noticing that Denmark is popping back at Trump saying, yeah, as I mentioned, Prime Minister not interested in Donald Trump's saying they should give themselves up, sell themselves. Also, yeah, Greenland, is ours, F off. Now, in one of these things, I saw a photo of the king of Denmark, right? This constitutional monarchy. And his name is Frederik X. So here is Frederick Andre Henrik Christian, His Majesty the King, Count of something, something, King of Denmark since January of 2024. Okay, so many people were, thinking of him as a thirst trap. He is a handsome guy, I guess, but I was not thinking that. I was thinking, holy shit, the King of Denmark? He looks like roughly my age. And I actually have a story about the Prince of Denmark. Now, I was wondering, could this guy be the same guy who was once the Prince of Denmark? Well, that would stand to reason. I mean, unless he was a younger son and his older brother passed on, either didn't take it or had not lived, this guy would be being the king, having been the prince. I know, it's not that complex of a analysis, but I started to freak out because I have a Prince of Denmark story. And the deal is this, actually I can put him up here. And here's another nice picture of our Prince of Denmark wearing some kind of military costume, which is somewhat ridiculous because I don't go in for monarchies, but of course he is the legit king. Okay, so what is my story of the Prince of Denmark? Well, when I was in law school, going into my third year, my roommates and I had lived in the previous year. So like my first year, I lived in a dorm. My second year, I had a bunch of roommates and we lived in this house in Somerville, which is like biking distance to the law school in Cambridge. So the issue with that place is the heat didn't really work and there were sort of bugs. And then being law students, we kind of sued our landlord and demanded they fix it up. And then we paid them back rent and all this shit, right? So we probably weren't going to live there. We were looking for another place to live. And one of my roommates, Victoria, was in Cambridge in the summer looking at bulletin boards for housing. And she noticed that she'd heard that Harvard actually would advertise some of their own off-campus apartments. And somehow she found one that seemed unbelievably fabulous. So this is what the place looked like. It was a whole house at 17 Ware Street. It was. And not only was this a whole house, but it had just been refurbished. All the fireplaces were working. There were 4 bedrooms. And for the person who was the sort of nice person, me, I took the smaller bedroom, the one right up there in the front. Do you see the front 2 windows? That was mine. But because it was smaller and didn't have a fireplace like all the other bedrooms, I also got a study in the back where I could put up a desk and work if I wanted to. So this was our off-campus apartment when I was a 3L, right? Okay. And there are stories about that apartment, including when using one of the fireplaces. This is a story I've told my kids. Whenever I tell people, be really careful about cleaning out a fireplace or why it's better to have a gas insert than a fireplace, I often mention how one of my roommates, I think it was you, Victoria, after we'd had a fire in the living room fireplace, she decided to clean it up the next day and took the ashes and put them into, swept them into a metal dustpan and then poured the metal dustpan contents into a brown paper bag and put it on the steps, the back steps of our house. You'll never believe what happened next. Yes, it caught on fire. The fire department came and chopped down the back steps, but it was fine. Harvard fixed it. Why am I telling you this story? Well, why in the hell did we get, and it was really good rent, why did we land on this place? Well, the reason why is, yes, my friends, the Prince of Denmark. Why? Okay, here we go. Here's an article from the Harvard Crimson from July of 1992. Prince changes apartments. Visiting Dane decides not to live in rent-controlled unit. This is so great. Bowing to Cambridge's diplomatic pressure, the Crown Prince of Denmark has agreed to pass on the rent-controlled house Harvard had assigned him, according to Cambridge city councilors and officials at the Danish embassy in New York. Prince Frederik unwittingly entered into controversy by accepting rent-controlled housing at 17 Ware Street for his stay next year as a visiting undergraduate. Concerned city councilors quickly drew up a politely worded resolution intended to nudge the prince out, and he obliged, quote, "A new residence for the prince has been found, so it has been solved. There's no problem anymore," said Danish Vice Consul Brigitte Hadersiel. "We certainly don't want any problem with the rent control controversy," she said. Hadersiel said she did not know where the prince would be living next fall, and Councillor William Walsh said he was pleased that the prince had reconsidered. Okay, so that, of course, and there's more, is how, where's that house, is how we found ourselves in that. Now, what we found hysterical is that after the Harvard Crimson and all the newspapers locally ran the story, they never found out that it was a bunch of law students who landed in this sweet rent-controlled apartment. No one cared that we had it. Now, you might say, Jen, I don't believe you. So I have the flip-in receipts. Let's blow this up. I Googled myself and I tried to black out the stuff that I didn't want people to see. This is a bit old. This is, when I was living in Northampton, I'm in Detroit. So my name is Jennifer Taub. My alias apparently is Jennifer S. Taub because my middle name is Sue. But you can see address history and you see 17 Ware Street, Cambridge, Mass. Yes, my friends, 17 Ware Street, Cambridge, Mass. And we will go back and you will see 17 Ware Street, Cambridge, Massachusetts. That, my friend, is crazy town, in part because Donald Trump thinks he's onto something, but I myself took something from the Kingdom of Denmark unwittingly. So yeah, F you, Donald. I had this idea decades ago. Okay, my friends, love you all. See you in the morning. Don't despair. This guy's got to go. We need to get on the telephone, call our members of Congress and say, impeach, convict, remove. That's it. It's in their power. Don't F around anymore, Chuck. Don't F around anymore, Republicans. It's on you. The world's counting on you. Yeah, now a lot of people say to me, it ain't going to happen, but I'm going to still ask for it. Because if you don't ask, you don't get. Okay, guys, adore you. Glad to be back. I don't want to say it's like a happy flippin' New Year because it's more of the same as New Year, but we're here together and that's what matters.
Hello, prison mates. It's the Jen Taub Show. Well, welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There is hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Jen Taub Show.